right, before we begin, we have created a special civic wiki for the Adler community. And on this wiki are parked all kinds of resources and studies and other things having to do with civics, demography, maps, studies having to do with some of the social justice issues that are of concern to your community, including the fight for 15, the pipeline of incarceration from schools, etc. We have a lot of information for you on the wiki, and please, you can join it by following the link that's on the screen or on the whiteboard. It will automatically get you enrolled. And once you're on the wiki, you'll see we ask you to take a text poll. We're trying to get a quick feed or feel for what is our civic history here at Adler. Who's doing what? So if you will text the answers to the questions, have you done any civic engagement activity in the past 24 months? So I'll leave that up to you, what that means. Any civic activity, including voting, text yes to 312-883-8103. If no, text no to the same number, okay? So you can do that while we're speaking here. And we'll share the results with you at the end of the meeting and also online. Okay, who the heck am I? And why should you care? Well, my name is Tom Tresser. I've been kicking around the city for over 40 years, and I call myself a civic educator and public defender. But not public defender as our esteemed guest is going to talk about in a minute, as part of her history, but no, in the sense of defending the very word public in Chicago and Illinois. The word public is a precious thing to me. My mother was a public school teacher, and you know, public libraries and public parks are part of how I got to be who I am. So I call myself a public defender, and over the last few years I've done a fair amount of work in that space, and just recently we operated the Civic Lab, a space for civic engagement in the West Loop. So that's a little bit of who I am. Okay, so now the question before us, what is justice? I'd like to hear from you. Give me some words. I say justice, you say? Shout it out.
She said no.
She said no justice. There is no, none, no. Oh, now. Oh, hi.
I'm just used to no justice, no.
Yeah, it's like, I guess that tells you where my head is at, you know. No, not now, no, but now. Other words, I say justice, you say equity. A powerful word. Other words, fair. Right. Something's got to be fair. If it's for if the rule is for me, it's got to be for you, right? Other words, for everyone. And our second guest has arrived. Hey, thanks, Will. Take a seat. Will Gazzardi, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Give me some more words, because we could probably spend the rest of the day on this, but I know you guys got things to do. Courts where you might find justice, hopefully. Yeah, other words. Peace? Peace. Some people say no justice, no peace. Other words, community. Okay. For all, yeah. Not just for a few, for sure. Any others, people dying to say something that we're not missing? We're missing public health. Again, that word public, powerful word. Okay, I'm gonna call it there, move this back. Okay, so these are words that we could unpack, right, and go deep on them. And like you could say, what does the absence of those things look like? So we know we have an idea in our head what a just society might be, but what does that really look like and feel like on the lived day-to-day? And again, people will have stories, and you know, we could probably, as I say, spend a month unpacking what this means to you and your personal stories. But let's leave those words up for now, and let's see what somebody had to say about that, who is well known to us. His name is on the building. Dr. Adler. He said, perfection is not attained by dominating others, promoting competition, or tolerating inequality. Rather, it is only achieved through the development of social interest and appreciation for the absolute truth of the essential communal nature of human life. The essential communal nature, like we're in this together? Oh, what a concept. So this guy was ahead of his time for sure. And this comes from your planning document from Adler called the Adler Socially Responsible Practice Project. And there's more in that document. I recommend it to you. Okay, that's what he said. That's what you want. That's why we're here, I would say. You agree? That's why we're here. So, how are we doing? How are we doing? Now, I'm going to spend just a few more minutes with you before we turn the mic over to our esteemed guests, but I'm going to now depress you with some statistics. Now, we could pick a wide number of statistics and metrics to say, like, how are we doing, with respect to justice? Just look at the newspaper, on any given day. But I've picked a few that I think are very significant. Okay, let's talk about wealth. If land were divided like U.S. wealth, the United States map would look like this, with 1% getting, I don't know, everything from Texas to Alaska or something. And 1% would get all that, and the remaining 90% own that part of the map. This chart has been seen in newspapers quite a lot. It tracks the amount of wealth that the 1% have, all the way back to when the income tax was created in 1916. So this is as far back as records go, up until pretty much the current day. And we see that just before the stock market crash of 1929, the 1% had just close to 25% of the wealth of the country. Now we flash forward to the present day, and it's the same. So it's gone down, and now it's all the way up here. And now this stopped in a few years ago, so it would be right about here, in terms of the contemporary numbers. So what's up with that? That doesn't look very just to me. That doesn't sound like it answers the specs that you guys put out a few minutes ago. I think we are missing something here, according to what you guys are looking for. And, we're coming on, we've just passed the celebration of Dr. King, and, we're entering into Black History Month, and so this is the time traditionally where, I guess, students around the country, around the world, are contemplating the legacy of Dr. King. But 50 years and 60 years on, we find that the median white family is worth 70 times that of an African-American family. 70 times. And here is the hourly wage differential. The red is the hourly wage for white folks, and this blue line here is for Hispanic, and the black line is for African Americans. That's about a $6 difference on an hour-by-hour basis. That doesn't seem correct either. Home ownership, they say the American dream is to have your white picket fence and a home to come home to and lay your head down and commune with your family and loved ones. I know that's my dream as a person, I always wanted to own my own home. Well, who can own a home today? It's down for everybody. The shaded areas are the Great Recessions. So the non-Hispanic white cohort is hovering over 70%, about 72%. The African American community is here, down at about 42%. That's a 30% differential. So as far as the American dream is concerned, if you think American dream equals home ownership, a whole lot of folks haven't got a chance. They're not on the chart. That's not right. And it all adds up, I'm afraid to say, to household wealth, because income is one part, home ownership, of course, is another thing, stocks, bonds, all that other stuff that people have, their stuff, it adds up to household wealth. So Here is, in 2013, the median net worth of a white family is about $142,000. The median net worth of a non-white family is $18,000, ladies and gentlemen. That's a difference of almost $124,000. That is completely off the charts in terms of what you guys were expecting for equity and fairness and having a shot, right? Because if you have no money in the bank, your opportunities are certainly limited. All right, this leads to a little video. This is about a minute and a half. This talks about social mobility because that's what we all believe in, right? You might be started out at a certain station in life that didn't have a lot of stuff, but this is America, right? So you should be able to get someplace. So let's watch this brief video.
This graph, plotting the relationship between economic mobility and economic inequality, has been dubbed the Great Gatsby Curve. By intergenerational mobility, we mean simply the extent to which income levels are able to change across generations. This is measured by the intergenerational earnings elasticity on a scale of 1 to 0. If there were no mobility at all poor children would become poor adults, and all rich children would become rich adults, and the elasticity measure would be 1. If, at the other extreme, there was no relationship between family background and adult outcomes, if a child born into poverty would have exactly the same likelihood of earning a high income as a child born into a rich family, the elasticity would be 0. On the other axis, we use the basic Gini coefficient measure for inequality, again a 0 to 1 scale on which the higher the score, the higher the inequality. So, we want to be in this corner, with low levels of inequality and a lesser likelihood that family backgrounds determine life chances. But of course, we're in this corner, with the highest rate of inequality among our peers, and an intergenerational immobility second only to class-bound Great Britain.
Class-bound Great Britain. I love that. Didn't we fight a revolution so there'd be no kings? You know, that everybody would be the master of their ship? Well, guess what? We're about equal with them in terms of these measures. All right, back to this there. There's a tricky thing here with this keyboard. Okay, so I'm almost done. So how are we doing in Illinois? Right now, from the headlines, the state of Illinois owes about $8.5 billion to various vendors, including the nonprofit sector. That would include the places where you guys want to work, may be working, hope to work, have worked. These are your friends and colleagues that are out there in the world doing the good things that you're being trained to do. Life is hard for them, to say the least. And another $4 billion to the universities. So if you're someone on aid at going to a public university, the university may shut down for all you know. And now what are you going to do? This leads to hardships of unimaginable scope, including these headlines. The safety net is unraveling, layoffs, Lutheran Services, the largest provider of social services in Illinois, laying off 750 people. The director was on the news the other day. He was practically hysterical because he was talking about shelter care, drug addiction, foster care, ex-offender rehab programs. I mean, it was a long list of woe, all gone. What are you going to do? In some places, executive directors are taking out personal loans to secure payroll. And it's funny, I note this on the website that I took this headline. Look, there's Adler University's banner ad saying, think you can change the world? You're right. Okay, we're here to prove that statement. That's fantastic. Well, it's called the American Dream because you have to be asleep to believe it, according to this sad graphic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've been in this civic game for over 40 years, And I've started 13 nonprofit enterprises in the arts and the community development and civics, but I have to say, we are losing. We are losing. We are losing ground. And for all the work that we do in our fields, all the helping, the caring, the healing, the teaching, the preaching, all that we do is not enough. It simply is not enough. So now I'd like to pass the mic to our first guest to help us with some insights about what we can do about all this and offer some advice. Now, Kim Fox is a candidate for Cook County State's Attorney in the upcoming March 15th Democratic primary. She has a law degree from Southern Illinois University, and she was a guardian with the Cook County Public Guardian's Office, where she managed a caseload of over 150 children, pushing them and helping them through the justice system. She then became an assistant state's attorney for Cook County, where she served for 12 years. She managed a docket there of more than 5,000 criminal cases and handled everything from felony to first-degree murder and other crimes. But most recently, she served as the chief of staff for Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. And as her advisor and strategist, led the county's second largest county with a $4 billion budget, and counseled President Preckwinkle on issues ranging from finances to public safety and juvenile detention and much more. She's the board president of Planned Parenthood of Illinois, and she has served as the board president for Free Spirit Media. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Fox knows your world very, very well. Let's welcome her to Adler.
Can I stand? I'm going to stand. And he left the most important part off my resume, that I'm a board trustee here at Adler. So it's an honor to actually be here as a new board trustee. I've just joined the board earlier this school year, so it's a pleasure to be here. That was really depressing. I thought I was going to bring the depression and then try to lighten us up. But you know, it's a good context for me to start my own personal narrative when we talk about the wealth disparities and generational poverty. These are issues that are closely related to my own personal journey, to how I've gotten to where I've gotten in my life. You know, I grew up in Cabrini Green, which I grew up in the 70s and 80s there. At the time, it was the most notorious housing project in the country. And I was there as a child of a teenage mom who was 18 when she had me, 17 when she had my brother. My father had gone off to school and kept going. And so we were raised in a single-parent household in an area of concentrated poverty with under-resourced schools, a lack of investment in the community, so grocery stores, banks, institutions that are in the community for purposes of thriving weren't there. And our school system there was woefully inadequate for the needs of its students. And, you know, it's hard to remember what housing projects in Chicago look like because we knocked down the buildings. It literally was poverty stacked on top of each other. It's like 15 floors in the high rises that I lived in. There were two sets. There was the white projects and the red projects. And depending on who you talk to, one was worse than the other. I'm from the white projects, so the red projects were horrible. So the red projects, I think they had 17 floors. We had 15 floors. And it's literally there. You'd have a ramp outside your door. We called it a ramp, like a concrete floor and netting, fencing, and that was our outside, running up and down a ramp. And it was 15 floors of ramps in this, you know, section of the city that literally could be forgotten by anyone else. Like people just would say, don't go by Larrabee and Division, don't go that way. And people who didn't live there or come from there would never go there. And so, you know, the context of that concentration, that visible concentration of poverty in the people who live in those buildings is a real good context for talking about what we've just seen on the chart and how do you have the upward mobility when literally you're stacked on poverty. Like it is a literal stacking poverty on poverty on poverty and no opportunities to move beyond that. you take with that, those risk factors of being born in poverty to a single parent, to the fact that I talk about I was sexually abused as a child by a relative. Again, trauma that is inflicted in the midst of a universe in which services to deal with such trauma don't exist. And then we talked about briefly, I think heard someone talk about public health. And at the time, we were on public health. They used to have green cards back then, and you had to have a green card. And really the inaccessibility of healthcare services within that area because they understaffed the healthcare and the mental health services. And you had literally stacks of people all going to one office to receive treatment. And so when we talk about the American dream, when we talk about, what it is that you all do, it's really important to remember that history. I tell my history everywhere I go, largely because it frames everything that I do in terms of policy. It frames every decision that I've made in terms of my career and how we can use our political system to make lives better, more fair, more equitable, more just for those who we had for many, many, many years and centuries, I would say, put people off into the corner that we can conveniently forget about them. So I left Cabrini when I was 8. My family was still there till I was about 14. We moved literally a mile north into Old Town Lincoln Park, where I went to a school that was much better resourced. I went to a school where there were children who had 2 parents in the home. Their expectations for what I could achieve was much different than it was in the projects. But we were still very poor, and we knew that we were poor because we now had something to juxtapose it with. Like when you're poor and everybody's poor, you think you actually have a little more than you do because it may literally be someone who has less. When you are in a school where you see other people who have more, it's really realized that you don't have very much. We moved around a lot. I became homeless in high school for about 6 months and had to go to high school and work into the shelter every day while still trying to maintain my grades. Made it out, went to college, law school, became a lawyer, and then he ran down my career. The personal narrative is really, really important to me, again, because I think it informs a lot of the work that you all do here at Adler. It's one of the main reasons that I wanted to join your board, because while as an assistant public guardian and dealing with children who literally were just like me, who had the same risk factors as me, the same issues of trauma that I had to deal with, the same issues of poverty and inequality, except the difference was they were caught up in our foster care system and they were separated from family. And we could see, or I could see that, really that there was not a difference between us other than I was not in the foster care system. And then we could see the trajectory for those same kids who had those same risk factors and those same traumas. They would go from our foster care system to our criminal court system with relative ease. And so it would be, you care. We're public guardians. I'm advocating for your best interests until you break a window, until you tag a building, until you are caught smoking weed. And then you are gone from, someone we're advocating for to someone we're prosecuting. And so the work that I did in juvenile justice in the state's attorney's office was trying to find that balance of how do we know that we have vulnerable populations that are literally the system is stacked against, and find meaningful ways to intervene in their lives. And whether it's around social services, with mental health services, drug treatment services, and the like. And then calling out, because I haven't talked about it, that one factor that it permeates all of this when we talk about the inequalities is the racial component to it, right? And people are very uncomfortable talking about race. It's very easy to talk about it in terms of just poverty, but we have to talk about it with race and poverty because it permeates all of it. So I can tell you when I lived in Cabrini, I think there were 3 white families in the whole acre of where we were. Now, there might have been more. They didn't come out. I don't know. But I can tell you it was a largely African-American community. I can tell you that our criminal justice system here in Cook County is disproportionate to people of color. So our jail, largest jail in the country, largest single-site jail in the country, 86% of the people in our jails are African American and Latino, 86%. Our juvenile temporary detention center, 94% African American and Latino. So there's this racial disparity component, and there's also these factors that we can see for the people who come through our jails and our juvenile temporary detention center. Again, the trauma issue, the education issue, the poverty issue, they're all linked. It's an interesting case study to see when we talk about the school to prison pipeline. We literally know who is going to end up in our prisons from about the age of 12. And how we don't use our resources to stop the pipeline and intervene earlier is mind-boggling to me. So when we talk about why this work is important, why your work is important, is because we lose a generation or generations of children to a criminal justice system that we know is failing because we wait until the very end to catch them out of the pipeline at the adult level. And so that's why I'm running for state's attorney. Because there's a pivotal role for the prosecutor in all of this. One, we've never had a prosecutor in this county, and I'm just going to say it, and I don't know prosecutors from 1901, but I'm just going to claim that they've never done it, who really talk about the social impacts, who talk not just about crime and punishment, but the social justice issues that are interwoven in our criminal justice system that will not allow us to alleviate the issues of crime and violence until we take into account all of the social complexities that go into it. That it's really not just a matter of you did the crime, you did the time. If we really want to be mindful about our dollar and our safety and really stem violence, you have to figure out how do we prevent violence. And some of the ways that we do that are make proper investments before the violent act starts, before the violence goes. And so I know Representative Guzzardi is going to talk to you about some of the things that we should be doing, and we're hamstrung right now down in Springfield, but around mental health. Not investing in mental health, cutting down mental health leads to increases in our criminal justice system. Not investing or cutting special education services in our schools leads to higher arrest rates in our schools, and that school to prison pipeline explodes because it's not a matter of criminality, it's a lack of resources to deal with non-criminal behavior, delinquent, off track, but not criminal, that becomes criminalized because we don't have the resources to deal with it in its proper context, and we've become comfortable dealing with it in our criminal justice system. I think I'm out of time. So I say all of that, and education. Some of our most underfunded schools are where we have the highest incidence of violence. Like, they're all connected. And if we take a simply myopic view of our criminal justice system, of waiting for people to do bad things or waiting for people to be harmed before we intervene, and those interventions are in no way matched to what the needs are, what we will continue to see in Cook County is an increase in crime, an increase in the criminal justice system, particularly around our young people, because we're going at it backwards. So I'm running for state's attorney largely because I've spent my entire career around these issues of not just criminal justice, but social justice, and because it is deeply, deeply personal to me. When you see the graph, I just read an article this morning that talks about the impact of poverty on young people and how you remain in those cycles, and that when you become adults, for people who live in those concentrations of poverty, they fare worse than their counterparts. And there's an acknowledgement of it. We know it. We see it. You tear down the projects and you move those folks around, they're not faring better because the buildings aren't stacked. They're just in a different area, still suffering with the same indignities that they had before, and we act like we are expecting a different outcome. And so I will turn it over to Will, but we need a state's attorney. We need someone in law enforcement who recognizes that we have to deal with the holistic approach to crime and punishment and justice. Otherwise, these knee-jerk reactions, these policies that we implement, mandatory minimums and things of the like, that have a disproportionate impact on communities and don't make us any safer, will continue to set us back. So Vote for Kim Fox. I think I could say that. I can talk more about policy, but you get me in a university in wonky, I feel really good. So thank you, Kim Fox.
Thank you. You can hold on to that. Thank you so much. Now we're going to switch our focus a little bit.
I know the headliner went, y'all are out of here. I see it. That's okay. That's okay. I'm not offended, really.
Hey. So our second special guest is Will Guzzardi. He is the state representative of Illinois' 39th district. That includes Logan Square. He's currently serving his first term in the Illinois General Assembly. Before being elected in 2014, Will worked as a reporter for the Huffington Post, where he included pioneering reporting on the underseen and often unappreciated work of nonprofit groups and community organizations across the city. He has been an active and effective organizer on many fronts. He organized with Code, Communities Organized for Democracy and Education, to fight for an elected school board in Chicago. And he can perhaps talk about that as well. He serves on the advisory board of Chicago Votes, which is an awesome organization that's all about civic engagement for millennials and getting more people to vote. And they were instrumental in getting us online voter registration in Illinois. Yes. So, Mr. Guzzardi has covered your world, and he knows it very well. Let's welcome Will Guzzardi to Adler.
Thank you, Tom. Let's give it up one more time for Kim Fox. My goodness. We're working our tails off on the Northwest side trying to help this woman get elected. I think the kinds of changes that we could see here in the county and around the state by having a leader like him in office would just be remarkable. There's a lot of things on my mind right now. I want to start by putting a little color into some of the numbers that Tom led off with about what's going on in the state of Illinois. Because here's the thing about human beings, we're really bad about dealing with like magnitudes of numbers and what they mean. Like the difference between a million and a billion and a trillion is really hard for us to wrap our heads around because we're, just apes standing on 2 feet and we're used to tens and hundreds. So we're not really that good at like calculus. So when he says 4.6 billion and this person is owed 100 million and these people need 50 million and there's a $1 trillion, that stuff sort of washes over us as humans. We're just not wired for that stuff. So let me just tell you where I was yesterday to put a little bit of a face on this. So yesterday morning, I was at a press conference for Family Home Services, which is a sort of mid-size agency that provides home care to elderly people and people with disabilities, right? So mostly Black and Latina women work at this agency. They get paid $10 or $11 an hour. And they spend 30 or 40 hours a week with one or maybe two clients. Somebody who's 87 years old and can't take care of themselves, a little girl with severe disabilities. So these people are caring for the absolutely most vulnerable people in our society. We are compensating them embarrassingly badly. And right now, the state of Illinois isn't paying them. They're not paying the agency. So the agency has a contract with the Illinois Department of Aging. So the state says, you know what, we're going to reimburse you for these services that you provide. We have this budget crisis, which I'm going to get into in a minute. Budget crisis is sort of a misnomer for it. But we're dealing with this budget problem right now. The state says, continue providing these services, but we can't really pay you for them right now. So I'm sitting here next to the woman who runs this agency who says we've borrowed every possible dollar that the banks are willing to let us borrow just to pay people's salaries. Our employees, these women are standing right here talking at this press conference about their clients. They're continuing to go out there and serve people. And we just don't have the money. So starting next week, we're going to pay all our employees half. We're going to pay them $5 an hour instead of $10 an hour because look, it's illegal. It's against the minimum wage laws in this country. But the only other choice for us is to stop serving, right? Is to lay people off. And while she didn't say this, I mean, the obvious implication here is that what that means is that people are going to either go to nursing homes or die, right? What happens when this care doesn't show up for people? Even for a brief interruption of service for the very elderly and the severely disabled, they're either independent living is taken away from them or they die at home. And this is one agency, right? Family Home Services, they have about a couple hundred employees. They're serving several hundred clients. There are agencies like this around the state doing all kinds of care for all kinds of people on the brink of profound collapse in their lives, right? People with drug and alcohol addiction, people with disabilities, people who are elderly, people who require child care, right? Single moms who are going out working and need child care for their children. These are the services that the state is failing to provide right now, and it's not only the women who make $10 an hour who next week are going to make $5 an hour, right? Imagine how they're going to get by making $5 an hour. There's a reason we have minimum wage laws in this country, but it's also the people that they serve, right? So when we talk about the abstractions and the numbers, it's important to remember who is being affected by this, and it's always people of color, the sick, the disabled, the elderly, right? The people who are systematically oppressed by our society already are always the first ones on the line. And meanwhile, on the 1st and 15th of every month, the state of Illinois makes a contractual payment to Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase and several other banks for what are called interest rate swaps, which is a really technical financial instrument that we're engaged in. I don't want to go into the details of that, but the point is, the banks are at the front of the line getting paid every 1st and 15th. And the social service agencies are months behind in their reimbursements. So what's at stake right now? I think the way people describe, excuse me, sorry. The way people describe what's going on in Illinois right now is often as a personality battle. I mean, this is perfect right here. This is how people describe the problem. I don't know if y'all can see this. Bruce Rauner, Mike Madigan. Excuse me, I gotta get some water. It's funny, in holding this article up to you guys, there's a picture of me on the back. That was a little embarrassing. People often describe this as a war of personalities between Bruce Rauner and Mike Madigan. It is not. It's not. I, as a member of the General Assembly, am not just doing what I'm doing because Mike Madigan is telling me to do it, and the Republicans aren't doing what they're doing because Bruce Rauner is telling them to do it. What's at stake right now in Illinois is a fundamental conflict of ideologies. It's a conflict of ideologies that's rooted in the very foundation of this country, and it's one that we have been struggling with since this country's inception, right? This country was founded as a country in which equality of opportunity was to be available to everyone. It was also founded as a country with legal racism and slavery, right? So from the very origins of our country, we talked about two things simultaneously: providing equity to everyone, and also a structurally racist and oppressive system in which wealth and power flowed from the poorest up to the richest, right? And those two ideologies, those two beliefs have been in conflict since the foundation of this country. And yes, we have had enormous gains. We've had civil rights and rights for women and the labor movement and the minimum wage and the weekend, right? In which the wealth and power at the very top was distributed more broadly to people who had been systematically deprived of it. But we've also had slavery and Jim Crow and mass incarceration and the oppression of immigrants in this country from Mexico and from all other parts of the world, to where the forces of wealth and power, I mean, what is slavery or Jim Crow or, Mexican farm workers getting paid $1 a day? What's that about? That's about collecting power and resources and wealth from the poor and bringing it up to the rich, right? Taking from the many and bringing it to the few. So that's the history of this country. It's a struggle between those two contravening forces. And in Illinois, that struggle is very real right now today. I'm going to talk about tax policy for 2 minutes, and it's going to be boring, but I just want y'all to stay with me for this because it's really important. In 2011, Governor Quinn raised the income tax from 3% to 5%. It was a temporary extension of the income tax, and it was going to start going away in 2015. That new money helped pay for a lot of the programs that our most vulnerable rely on. At the beginning of this year, that income tax started going back down from 5% to 3.75%. Okay, I see already the glazing over of the eyes. I know, stay with me for one more second on this though. What happens when the income tax goes from 5 to 3.75? If I make $20,000 a year, that means I get a couple $100 back, right? 1% of my income is $200, so if it goes down 1.25%, I get $250 back. So that's something, right? That's 20 bucks a month. If I make $10 million a year, if I'm Bruce Rauner and I make $50 million in a year, when that goes down 1.25%, 1% of 50 million is 500,000. So I make $625,000 back. So when the income tax went down from 5 to 3 3/4, we gave a huge tax break to the very wealthiest people in the state, and a very, very small tax break to working families. Of that tax break, we gave about $5 billion in taxes back. More than $1 billion of the $5 billion went to the top 1% of earners. Okay? So we're giving huge amounts of money to the Bruce Rauner class and very little money, relatively speaking, to working families. And meanwhile, the cuts that come as a result of the loss of $5 billion in state government affect working families much harder, of course, than they affect the very wealthy, right? When there's no MAP grants to help pay for college tuition, you're either not going to continue to go to college or you're going to get deeper into debt in order to pay for it. When there's no treatment for people who are addicted to drugs or alcohol, right? You're either going to have to pay for a private treatment program, which is money you probably can't afford, or you're going to end up in the criminal justice system, right? This is not affecting folks at the very top in the way that it's affecting us. So what we've seen under Bruce Rauner's administration has been a big step forward for the side of that American fight that wants to take the resources from the poor and bring them up to the rich, right? We saw a huge tax break for the rich, which is being paid for by cuts to programs for the poor and for the systematically oppressed, for black people and Latino people and women and people with disabilities and the elderly and small children who need our care, right? So the fight that we're engaged in is a fight of ideology. And you all, because of the work that you do, I know which side of this fight you're on. And the thing that I would say to you is that you can't sit on the sidelines. It's easy to feel that politics is beyond our reach, that it's caught up in this system of you know, the machine and the politicians, and it's corrupt and it's messy and it's all this stuff, and that we just have to live with the results of whatever politics gives us. But I really profoundly urge you not to let that happen, because when good people like us say we're going to leave that messy stuff to the politicians, the result is that the forces of power win, and the side fighting for the oppressed, we just have to deal with what they give us, right? So I really urge you, the work that you do, that you're training to do, that you're going to do in your professional lives is so meaningful. Everyone in this city owes you an enormous debt of gratitude for taking on the kind of service that you're going to. But like Tom said at the very beginning of this, I'm afraid to say it's not enough. That we need your voices advocating in the political space, demanding justice for the people whom you serve, and not just in your community, but in the political arena. We need you to engage. And I'm standing here, I'm going to shut up in a second, I promise. I'm standing here as living proof that that engagement is possible and that it can affect real change. I ran for office against an incumbent who was part of the political machine, who'd been in power for 12 years, who was connected to every possible political institution you could imagine. And I ran a volunteer-driven grassroots campaign that was funded by people contributing $20 and $50, people showing up and knocking on doors and making phone calls to voters in my district. No one gave us a snowball's chance in hell to win. The reason why I'm standing here as a state representative is because good people who believed in this fight took it on, and they took it to the streets, and they understood that political engagement was a vehicle toward attaining social justice. That's why I'm a state rep and not just working for the Huffington Post. So, not that there's anything wrong with that, it's a wonderful job. But please, I urge you guys, join us in this struggle, because right now, our side's losing. And we can't let that happen for the people who we want to serve and for the people who deserve our help. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Well, we have an embarrassment of riches of knowledge and experience here, so would you guys want to talk to each other or ask each other a question or comment? Or
We could talk to each other anytime. We
yeah.
could hear from you all.
Okay, well then let's get some questions or comments from the audience for our distinguished guests. And I'll hold the mic so we can get this on tape. So just raise your hand, I'll try to hustle over to you.
What kind of things can people do that are low-hanging fruit that we can do, like when we leave today?
I mean, I think I can talk about this stuff, right? You can go to kimfox.com and volunteer for her campaign. I'm telling you, she has 6 weeks left. This is going to be an extremely difficult and contested race. You've got someone who is the champion of mass incarceration running against someone who's the champion of social justice. Like, man, if there was not a more clear race, I don't know what you could possibly think of. Donate $10 a month and like find 2 or 3 days in which you can go make some phone calls for her.
Yes, sir.
All right, so this is a 2-question with 1 answer. Okay, so I always go and vote. I always do. But my question is, you always hear the promises are made. Some are kept, most of them are not. So that's what always frustrates me. And then the second thing is, how can politics work where Republicans are fighting Democrats, Democrats are fighting Republicans, and it's always going to be that fight. So nothing gets done. Example, happening in Illinois right now. We can't wait forever. So that's why I will go vote, but I see my friends, family members that they just don't care because of that. So I guess that's a two thing in 1 answer.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand that. This is my first foray running for office because, like I said, where I grew up, we used to walk by fields that have vote for Smith or whatever. And I'd be like, why would anybody vote for Smith? It looked bad 4 years ago. And so that frustration, I understand it, but to Will's point, if we don't have good people stepping up to enter into the political arena, like a Will Guzzardi, who went against the entrenchment and is trying. I mean, if we don't have people in the fight, because, you know, we're in America, that we all aren't going to be on the same alignment. There should be some pushing and shoving of ideas to figure out what's in the best interest of all of us. But when we succumb to allow the people who are only in it for their own self-interest, we lose. And the notion that, you know, it's not worth even trying because they're not going to benefit us really feeds into that because, you know, like Will said, he went up against someone who clearly was not doing their job, but they had the job because of something else. I'm up against someone who's running for a 3rd term, and the list of atrocities is so long, but no one wanted to get up and run against her. And so for us to put our hands up and we watch what happened, say, for example, in the case of Laquan McDonald, and the whole world is watching us. It's not enough to say, well, we didn't do it, our elected officials did, but we're suffering the impact of it because good people have done nothing. I mean, and so it is a frustrating endeavor dealing with politics and government and the entrenchment, and government moves really slow. It's hard to make change. But if you have people that don't even try, we continue to inherit systems, generations inherit the dysfunction, and it becomes harder to get out. I cannot say strongly enough that staying home from the polls gets us any further ahead.
Yeah.
It can't.
Can I add one more thing to it, too? There's a thing about when you get elected, who you owe it to, I guess, right? And for someone like me, the kind of campaign that I ran, I know it's very clear to me the reason why I'm in office is because of the people in my community who volunteer themselves and helped me get there. And we had a very clear understanding between us of why they were doing it and why I was doing it, right? So I know when I go to Springfield who I'm accountable to, and I know that if I turn my back on those folks, they're gonna have my ass, pardon my language. But if we aren't engaging, right, then folks are gonna be getting elected because of the campaign contributions from the big corporations or the wealthy individuals who support them. And it's going to be those interests who they're going to be representing. And they're going to be saying, well, if I don't support those interests, those guys are going to have my ass. So if we want our elected officials to hold up their promises to us, we have to be engaged in relationship with them, They need to know that they owe us something. They need to know that they have a commitment to us, and we're going to hold their feet to the fire to meet that commitment.
Well, this is a tasty lunch. I could snack all day with you guys, but we do have a time constraint on us till 1 o'clock, so I think we have one more question.
So what resources do you recommend to become more educated about the various people running and all the positions? I remember a few years ago, I went in and I voted, and I got to the judges section, for instance, and had no idea who I was voting for, and there would only be one name there, and there was no one next to them. And then I read in the paper 20 minutes later that about all the things that I shouldn't have voted for. So what are the best resources to know more, to know who's running and which offices matter and what the impact those smaller offices have on our community?
Yeah, that's a great point, particularly about the judges. When I'm out on a stump, the judges are with me a lot, and we have a really good slate of judges who are running. The bar associations, the associations of lawyers, do evaluations of lawyers, or each of the lawyers and judges who are running for office. It is critical. The Alliance of Bar Associations, I specifically recommend the Chicago Council of Lawyers. I used to be on their board too. They're really smart, progressive group of lawyers who do a thorough evaluation. Some bar associations give a thumbs up or thumbs down without any context. But you go to Chicago Council of Lawyers, you go to their website, they will tell you, what the evaluation entailed. They talk to adversaries who worked against these lawyers and will give you a complete picture of the judge. The judges being at the bottom of the ballot, you have to vote for them. You have to vote for judges. Good judges matter. Again, to go back to the Laquan McDonald case, the only reason we found out about it was because Judge Valderrama ordered the release. And so we got there because a judge did it. And we have other judges who, like you say, are terrible. And it's largely because once they're elected, it's hard to get them off because people don't pay attention and exercise that right as it relates to judges. So that's one easy way. ChicagoCouncilOfLawyers.org can give you a full context of the judges who are running. Now, for other offices, I'll let Will answer that.
Yeah, I guess what I would just say is think about the issue or issues that really drive you the most strongly and find someone who you trust on those issues. Maybe it's reproductive health. Go to Personal PAC, and they make endorsements at every level, and that's their single thing is reproductive health. This is a former board member of Personal PAC.
Planned Parenthood.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But endorsed by Personal PAC, yes.
There you go. But maybe it's public education. Go see who the Chicago Teachers Union is endorsing. Go see who the Illinois Federation of Teachers is endorsing. Whatever that issue or those issues that are most important to you, find someone you trust on those issues and go hear from them. And go get the sample ballot. Like ChicagoElections.com, you can, I think pretty soon it'll be available, but at least a month before the election, you can get a picture of exactly how your ballot is going to look. And so you can see what all the races are and where all the choices are. And yeah, this is a little work. And I wish we were better as elected officials about bringing this information to you. But as it stands, you guys are very civically engaged and thoughtful people, so you have the tools available to you to go do some of this. Get that sample ballot, say, oh wait, my state representative, that race is contested. I wonder who these two guys are. Go find someone you trust and see what they have to say about it.
Okay, now we're at the end of our time. So I'd like the camera to zoom in on Kim first and then Will. So face the camera. And you're addressing the Adler student body, the Adler faculty, and all the Adlerians to come. What do you have to say to them about getting involved in politics?
I think the only way that we can change the fundamental issues that are facing our county, our state, is by having good citizens step up and hold our elected officials accountable. It's not enough to sit at home and complain. It's not enough to sit in your groups and talk about it. You have to be actively engaged. And that doesn't necessarily mean, vote for me, but at least be educated about the issues. And real advocacy means, getting up and doing something. And whether that's writing a letter to your elected officials expressing your concerns or questions, whether it's going down to talk to someone or picking up the phone, or whether it's volunteering for a political campaign, that level of advocacy and engagement makes it very difficult for people in power to ignore large constituencies. It really is a squeaky wheel gets the oil. And what's happened is so many people who have been hurt the most and been the most disenfranchised by our political system get to be the scapegoats because their voices don't matter in the political spectrum. The people who Will talked about who are suffering the most and need it the most, their voices are appreciated the absolute least. And so we need people to be advocates for them and with them in a meaningful way all the way through, not just through election season. When we talk about accountability, it goes beyond March 15th, which is when the primary is for me. It should be March 15th of 2017 when I'm not up for election and you're asking me where our mass incarceration numbers are going. You're asking me about bond court. You're asking me about arrests. We have to engage continually on these issues and not just at election time. And that's not just for the people running for office, but for us as citizens as well. But do go to kimfox.com. 2 X's.
The floor is yours, Will.
Thanks. I would say simply that by participating, by being a member of this community, you know that we are participating in a struggle for social justice and for quality of life for everyone in our community. And I would just reiterate that that struggle doesn't only exist at the individual level, it exists at the political level, and to engage in that struggle fully, I believe that getting involved in the world of government and policy is crucially important. Find a way to advocate for the people whom you care about and the people whom you serve, not just at that individual level one-on-one, but in the broader sense. Fight for elected officials and leaders who are going to prioritize social justice, who are going to take that fight to the halls of power, because otherwise we'll just keep losing.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we don't want to lose any more, so thank you very much, Kim Fox and Will Guzzardi, for joining us here at the Adler Common Hour. Thank you very much.